The NBA playoffs are tipping off this weekend, and I wanted to preview a particular matchup, the Houston Rockets and the Golden State Warriors. Now, the Golden State Warriors have been up and down for much of this year. They did sink to the play-in tournament, but thanks to stellar performances from Steph Curry and Jimmy Butler, they were able to tame the Memphis Grizzlies. And in that particular play-in game, they got 30-point performances from both Jimmy and Steph. And when these two are clicking at full strength, Golden State's going to be a tough team to beat. The Grizzlies did give a really hard fight, but without Ja Morant for segments of the second half, it was just too much superstar power for the Grizzlies to overcome. Now, with this win, the Warriors are setting up a matchup with the second-seeded Houston Rockets, led by Ime Udoka. The Houston Rockets haven't been to the playoffs in over 5 years. The last time they did so was in the NBA bubble with James Harden. And since his trade request, the Rockets went into a big rebuild where they were teetering at the bottom of the NBA and had a couple of head coaches in the mix. But under Ime Udoka's leadership last season, they righted the ship. They finished at the 500 record, just missed the play-in tournament, but the foundation was set that this team was going to be a very physical team. They have some veterans like Dylan Brooks and Fred VanVleet from the Toronto Raptors. A lot of young talent. They got Jabari Smith in the 2022 draft. They drafted Jalen Green in 2021. Alperen Sengun from Turkey was another good talent that they picked up in the 2020 draft. It had taken a few years to get clicking on all cylinders, but this was really the year where they put it all together. In the last matchup against Golden State, they actually did beat the Warriors. They did so with physicality. That is something that Ime Udoka preaches with his system, and with players like Dylan Brooks, Amen Thompson, I mean, that is a big factor in how this defensive-minded Houston Rockets team has ascended up the Western Conference standings. In the last matchup, they not only beat the Golden State Warriors, they held Steph Curry to just 3 points on 1 of 10 shooting. Ime seemed to identify some other weaknesses with Golden State. Last time when these two teams met, anytime Steph had the ball, they were sending another defender to essentially box him inside the half-court line, kind of using the half-court line like an extra defender. And this really got into Steph's head. You could see anytime he found a sliver of space, he would jack up a shot. This is mainly thanks to Amen Thompson. You saw a lot of Amen Thompson in this recent matchup against Golden State, where anytime Steph was on the court, Amen Thompson was there. He really didn't let him get away from him too often. Steph is known to run around all over the court, but most of the time, Amen Thompson had contact with him throughout the entire game, especially in those offensive sets. And something I think Steve Kerr has to work on heading into this matchup, where he's going to have to find ways to punish the Rockets when they sell out to stop Steph Curry. Jimmy Butler is known to be hot and cold in terms of his aggressiveness, but based on the last 2 games where Jimmy was going for over 30 points a game against the LA Clippers in the regular season finale and the play-in game, I think playoff Jimmy is here, and they're going to need playoff Jimmy to be replicating that type of play that we've seen in past seasons. Now, getting back to that defensive matchup, Amen Thompson, like I said, did a great job of taking Steph out of the game, where even when they tried to send screens Steph's way, Steph just waved it off and basically made this a 4-on-4 matchup. But like I said, Jimmy is going to have to be a player that consistently wins his one-on-one matchup, and then it's going to take somebody else, whether it's Pods, whether it's Buddy Hield, or somebody else will have to step up, because I think that at this point, Draymond at this point cannot be a guy that really beats you offensively. I mean, he's a great passer of the basketball, but he's not a guy that consistently looks to score. And something else that I think the Warriors have to look for is, where is Fred VanVleet? Because they're going to have to hunt that matchup. I know Draymond Green maybe isn't the best offensive player, but if they can get switches where Fred is stuck on a bigger offensive type of player, well, I think that bodes trouble for the Houston Rockets. Now, can the Rockets replicate this for 4 games to win a 7-game series? Probably not, but I also think that the Warriors are relying on their own unsustainable system, which is just let the two-headed monster in Jimmy and Steph cook. Like I said, playoff Jimmy is back, but it's taken a while for him to get here. I mean, he was traded to Golden State in February just before the trade deadline, and it's been up and down, but they did have an early set of games where you saw a lot of success with the Golden State Warriors, where they were winning and winning quite often. Now, obviously that was against the middle to bottom tier type of teams in the NBA. The playoffs are a whole different animal, but I do think that with his ability to not just score the basketball, but also kind of create offense for himself and other guys, that's something that the Warriors haven't really had in recent years. I mean, Steph can do something, Draymond can do something, but those two players that I just mentioned also help out Jimmy Butler, because when Jimmy Butler was in Miami, he was shouldering the entire offensive load. He was the engine of the Miami Heat offense, being surrounded by second-round talent, undrafted talent that did outperform their draft position and their contracts. But let's face it, I mean, Jimmy Butler was the scoring offense, the passing offense, the guy that creates shots for other players, the guy that creates shots for other players, and takes on the best wing offensive player and is usually deployed on the perimeter as a talented wing defender. But now with the Warriors, I think he has an opportunity now just to really focus on scoring. Yes, he can still create for others, but in terms of defense, I mean, Draymond Green is still that Swiss Army knife. He's going to be on the block and also on the perimeter. They have Gary Payton Jr., he's a really good wing defender himself, and Jimmy can just do his thing. I think that's going to rejuvenate him. That's going to increase his energy levels, that he doesn't have to deplete his energy sources due to paying such high attention on the defensive end. And Steph already is going to be the sole focus of any defensive scheme. So again, Jimmy is going to have his fair share of one-on-one matchups, and it's going to be up to him to take advantage. Just like there's extra opportunities for Jimmy, those other opportunities, maybe when Jimmy gets cooking, it's going to create more opportunities for Steph. And I think between the combination of this 1-2 punch where Steph can maybe give you 20 to 30 points a game, and then you see maybe 20 to 25 points a game from Jimmy, that's going to be big dividends for the Warriors' success chances of advancing in this series against the Rockets. Now, the caveat or the wild card with this is going to be Draymond Green. We know about Draymond Green, his past. I mean, there's been some heated moments dating back to the 2016 finals. There's been the stomping on Domantas Sabonis' chest just 2 years ago. But this season, he's been relatively on good behavior. Other than a couple of interesting comments about Jordan Poole and then Cat and why he was missing games, well, I think at this point, Draymond has actually become a little bit more tame compared to past years, and I'm not really sure what's going on there, but good for him. But that's something that always kind of creeps back into this for the Warriors and the playoff hopes, because with his availability is really how far the Golden State Warriors go. And if he's available, the Warriors are usually up there with the top 4 teams in the Western Conference, but when he's not there, they're definitely a very vulnerable team. And he's going to have to keep his emotions in check, because I think the Warriors could survive an ejection where he maybe misses like a quarter or a half. But if he's taken out of a series due to a suspension, and the track record is there, the playoffs are always a microscope of in-season behavior, which we haven't seen this year. There's a track record of seasons past. I'm going to be a little bit wary to see what Draymond does, because there's Dylan Brooks. He's an agitator. He's a pest. Who knows? Those two guys could get into it where maybe one takes it too far and then you get a suspension. But do the Warriors have enough depth to keep up with these young Rockets? Because the Rockets remind me of other foes in the past that the Golden State Warriors have dealt with, whether it's the Sacramento Kings, the Memphis Grizzlies, who have been young, talented teams spearheaded by maybe a young budding superstar or a talented group of young players. But just like how those teams have fared, they end up falling to these more experienced teams like the Golden State Warriors. Definitely, again, Ime Udoka has done wonders to this Houston Rockets team. We talked about the impacts, the preaching of physicality, the bringing in the veterans like Dillon Brooks and FVV. Now it's really how that's executed. We have the sample size from the regular season, but this really is going to be a big prove-it series for the Houston Rockets. They've done really well in the regular season, but like I said, the playoffs are a whole different animal. Now it's going to be interesting to see who takes on Jimmy Butler. Now I think Dillon Brooks has the body to contain Jimmy Butler to the best of his abilities. They match up strength-wise, length-wise, and I think at this point Dillon Brooks has become a pretty solid defender where he can probably give Jimmy some headaches from time to time. Now, with Steph, we've already talked about how Amen Thompson will probably get a bevy of the looks, maybe some FVV in there as well. But I also think you could throw in Tari Eason to guard Jimmy Butler because he's a defensive wing that has some previous matchups with Jimmy in that previous game earlier in the season where he did a pretty good job on Jimmy from time to time, and so far this year Tari Eason has averaged nearly 3 stocks a game, and that's pretty impressive for a guy of his size and his length. Maybe you can throw in a little bit of Jabari Smith in there as well. The other big advantage that the Rockets do have in addition to their youth and their defensive prowess is their size. In the recent few weeks, Steven Adams has returned to the lineup and he missed all of last year, but now with Steven Adams healthy, the pairing of him and Sengun have been excellent for the Houston Rockets. In fact, they're devastating to opposing front courts. When they are on the court together, they have an offensive rating of 125.7 per 100 possessions, which is in the 98th percentile. And defensively, they're even better. As a duo, they're in the 100th percentile. So that's just how devastating this lineup can be. Now, the Warriors don't have a lot of size. I mean, at this point, they're going to deploy Draymond Green, a little bit of Kevon Looney, but I think somebody else that they definitely need to try and get into the flow of things is Jonathan Kuminga. For whatever reason, Jonathan Kuminga has not been able to crack the lineup whenever Steve Kerr is around, and Steve hasn't been able to figure out how to utilize a guy like Jonathan Kuminga's skill set. We saw this in the Olympics when he's been coaching Team USA, even in the FIBA World Cup, where he's had wings like Brandon Ingram and Jason Tatum, and he doesn't seem to know what to do with those players. Well, in Team USA, he had Kevin Durant, which he has had past experience, but Jonathan Kuminga in spurts has done a very good job. He just hasn't gotten the time to reflect that on the court. But with his combination of athleticism, size, versatility, it can poke some holes in this dingy Rockets defense to the point where he's a huge wild card. I would really expect Steve Kerr to give him a few minutes, especially in the first couple of games, before maybe he makes a change in the rotations as the series shifts back to Golden State for games 3 and 4. But I think Jonathan Kuminga could be a huge X factor in this series. Now, my prediction is that the Warriors have the experience, and that's always important in series like this. They have a lot of experience, and this seems like a similar circumstance to 2 years ago when they faced Sacramento Kings. Now, Ime has had his own experience against these very same Golden State Warriors in the finals 3 years ago. I just feel that the lack of offense, where you're depending on Jalen Green having a good night and FVV being a smaller guard, is going to pose some problems. And I think we didn't really talk about the Warriors defense, but it's also been pretty solid this year, and Jimmy Butler adds another dimension to that defensive prowess. And I'm going to pick the Golden State Warriors in 6 games. I think that they have the experience and they have been there, they've done that in seasons past, and I think at this point they're just better at operating in the half court compared to the Houston Rockets. Yes, the Rockets can get on the break due to steals, maybe just being the younger, faster team, or being a more defensively talented team. But when it comes down to how the playoffs slow down and is very half-court centric, I think that bodes well for the Golden State Warriors. So I'm going to pick the Warriors in 6 games. Comment your predictions. Who wins, Rockets or Warriors?